The sound of ripping cloth split the briefing room like a flare in the dark. Captain Cole Maddox, broad-shouldered under his salt-white camo, had torn the shoulder seam of Staff Sergeant Ava Rios's medic smock. Strips of fabric drifted to the concrete as 20 pairs of eyes pivoted toward her. "I don't need a babysitter," Maddox said, voice rough enough to draw blood. "I need killers." Ava didn't move, 5'7", compact, steady. Her pulse thudded in her jaw, but her stare stayed level. Around them, Bravo team leaned on the walls, men who measured worth in violence, smirking or looking away. A chair scraped, then slammed the wall. The echo lingered. "Enough!" said Colonel Elena Ward from the doorway. Her voice cut through the air like steel through frost. Silver hair drawn tight, eyes like slate, she took in the torn fabric, the circle of predators. "Staff Sergeant Rios stays on the patrol. That's an order." The silence thickened. Maddox's lip curled. "She's a liability." "She's your medic," Ward said flatly. "Treat her like one of your own." Gear rattled as the team dispersed. When Maddox passed, he leaned close, whiskey and mint burning her air. "Don't cost me a man tomorrow." Ava crouched, gathering the torn blouse. Her hands stayed steady, because they had to. She'd been called worse than babysitter in places that didn't exist on maps, by men whose names arrived redacted in ink. She folded the fabric and slid it into her ruck like evidence. Later, in the med cage at FOB Halberd, she rebuilt her kit piece by piece. Tourniquets tested to tension, pressure dressings rewrapped, quick clot gauze marked in thick Sharpie, vented chest seals, arterial clamps burnished dull. On a foam insert, 1 vial of ketamine, 1 tiny roll pouch, suture, mini forceps, micro scissors, tools no one expected a line medic to carry, because no one expected a line medic to perform surgery in a ditch. "You check every tourniquet like that?" Chief Petty Officer Nate Kim leaned against the door frame. Calm eyes, crow's feet, half smile of someone who'd seen too much and learned to stop showing it. "Every time," Ava said. He nodded at the faint crescent scar on her forearm. "That's not shrapnel." "Training mishap," she lied, smooth as breath through glass. Range time came late. Rifles barked in crisp, bored bursts. Maddox's voice rode the noise, sharp and commanding. Ava waited her turn. When it came, someone accidentally kicked her ammo can. Rounds scattered across gravel. She said nothing, just gathered them, loaded, and settled behind her carbine. 5 shots, 5 breaths. When the target trolley returned, the head box was drilled through, a ragged hole where precision lived. The range NCO gave a low whistle. Maddox said nothing. He looked not at the paper, but at her, at the way recoil barely nudged her frame. Night. The chow hall buzzed like a bar. Ava ate alone until Specialist Hannah Lee slid into the seat across from her. "They're out of line," Hannah said quietly. "If you ever need leverage, Building 3, basement." Ava looked up, but Hannah was already walking away. On her route back, a shadow detached from the floodlit motor pool. Master Sergeant Diego Cruz, Bravo's senior enlisted. His gaze wasn't hostile, just measuring, recording, as if every breath she took was another variable to account for. In her bunk, Ava stitched her blouse closed with black thread. Each pass was neat, precise, ritual more than repair. Her mind drifted to a night 3 years gone, a radio call that should have died with her team, a call sign she'd buried. Shade 17. Outside, rotors beat the dark like a pulse. Inside, she tied off the thread and laid the needle flat. Tomorrow would answer everyone's questions. Morning rolled in on diesel fumes and cold iron. Ava stepped into the pre-dawn with her ruck squared and rifle slung. Briefing at 0545 was crisp, the map lit by a jittering projector. Colonel Ward outlined the presence patrol, 4 MRAPs crawling the Dara Ravine, a throat of rock and scrub funneled between 1,000-meter spines. Locals called it the Scorpion Spine. Ambush country. "Questions?" Ward asked. Silence. Then Ava lifted a hand. "Ma'am, Grid 42 Sierra, natural choke. Recommend alternate ingress via..." Maddox barked a laugh. "Medic wants to drive now?" A few chuckles, the kind that tastes like copper. Ward's jaw ticked. "Noted," she said, though the route didn't change. They spilled into the yard, checked comms, mounted. Ava drew the short straw, rear Vic, tail end Charlie, the one that eats the dust and the trouble. She climbed in among 3 men who had bet beers on how fast she'd freeze when rounds snapped. Private Tyler Nash gave a toothy grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Try not to faint when we get spicy, Doc." Ava strapped her kit down. When she snapped her lid closed, she saw a folded square of paper skimming the foam. Hannah's handwriting in hurried pencil. "Bully DG3, basement, if you need proof." She slid it into a sleeve. The convoy rolled, big tires hissing crushed gravel. The ravine narrowed, sun lancing down in thin bars. Women vanished from courtyards. Men watched from shade, faces blank as walls. Ava's world telescoped, radio hiss, engine rumble, the click of a safety 2 seats down, the rhythm of her breathing. "Red one to all reds entering grid. Keep your heads." Maddox's voice came over net. Professional, in control. Ava scanned uphill. Her fingers found the kit's edge unconsciously, touching each pouch in order. Tourniquets, gauze, NCD, hemostatic. The tiny sutures hidden where no one would think to look. Old habits like rosary beads. Kim's voice cut the net. "Doc Rios, you good?" "Good," she said, because it was the only answer that ever mattered. The ravine pinched tighter, rock overrunning road, high ground leaning. Ava exhaled slow. Shade 17 burned at the back of her tongue like a secret. She swallowed it. She was a medic, just a medic. Just, "Red 4? Maddox again. "Radio check." Her mic clicked twice. 4 is green. "Copy." The world wheeled on in the peculiar quiet that comes before a storm, the calm where every small sound gets loud. A sparrow flicked from an acacia and Ava's eyes tracked its path automatically, the way you track muzzle flash. "Still think this is a Boy Scout hike?" Nash smirked. Ava checked her watch, the second hand scraping its own little orbit. Somewhere in her head, she was building an overlay. Angles, fields of fire, dead ground, lines of drift. It wasn't special. It was survival. In the lead, Vic, Maddox scratched behind one ear and watched dirt stream. He tried not to think about the ripped smock or how the medic's shooting had been surgical. He'd seen good medics, even great ones. He'd never seen hands like hers. Colonel Ward's voice popped on an encrypted secondary, tight and spare. "Bravo! Keep it clean. I want this show of presence to look like control." Control. Ava thought about the word, about how it breaks when reality arrives. In the sliver of window, a boy ran along a wall with a kite that couldn't find wind. Ava wanted to tell him to go inside. The ravine narrowed again. The second hand touched 12. The world blew apart. The IED lifted the second MRAP like a toy, slammed it onto its side in a shrug of flame. Shock punched air from lungs inside all 4 trucks. Dust and heat slapped skin. Ava's helmet hit the door frame, a cold bell ringing her skull. Then came the crackle of AK fire from the ridgelines, the zip of rounds, the meaty thwack of rounds meeting steel. "Contact! Contact! 360!" Voices collided on net. Ava's body moved before her mind returned. She grabbed her aid bag and vaulted from the rear Vic into a world of shattered sound. Gunfire stuttered overhead. The overturned MRAP howled with flames, ammo starting to cook. Someone inside pounded metal with a gloved hand, screaming stacked on screaming. "Rios!" Nate Kim's voice, 2 o'clock, pinned behind a tire, hands bloody to the wrist. He was working a chest wound with a knee on a man's arm to stop flailing. "I've got 1 Alpha, 1 Bravo." "Copy!" Ava sprinted low to the downed truck. Heat burned lashes. She ducked through a ragged doorframe, acrid smoke clawing her throat, and found a man half crushed, another curled against the firewall. She hooked her hands under the conscious soldier's armor and dragged, boots churning, felt his scream vibrate through her arms. Out, drop, roll back. The second man had a head laceration that painted his temple black, pulse strong, breathing ragged. She yanked him free as the truck coughed a gout of fire and boomed. Shrapnel drummed the dirt. She covered both bodies on reflex, felt hot grit pepper her plate carrier. "Red 1 RPGs from North Ridge." Maddox controlled barely. Rounds clawed the dirt within arm's reach. Ava's brain folded the battlefield. Friendlies here, here. Enemy fire lanes there. Dead space there. Best approach to the lead Vic. Broken, smoking, but still firing. Then a new sound, a wet gurgle over comms. "Red 1 is hit," Cruz grunted. "Maddox is down." Ava ran. She found Maddox half out of the commander's hatch, armor shredded low, a flood of dark blood and pale loops where no pale loops should be. His eyes were large and human and afraid. "Stay with me," Ava said, kneeling into blood, voice a calm she did not feel. "You're not dying today." "Hurts like—" He gagged. She cut his belt kit away, packed hands deep with hemostatic clamped bleeders with the tiny forceps she wasn't supposed to have. Her mind split. One piece working tissue, one piece tracking the battle, counting seconds, noting the shift in enemy volume, the incoming streak of another RPG. There wouldn't be time for the bird, not like this. Nate slid in behind the engine block, covering her with a carbine, firing in measured, angry commas. "I've got you." "Need analgesia," she said. He passed the ketamine like they'd rehearsed, like they both knew they hadn't. Ava drew, pushed, watched Maddox's face unlock from a rictus to something pliable but present. "Cole," she said, using his name, hooking him to the world. "Look at me." "Eyes on," he whispered. "Good, you're going to live." Her hands worked an impossible task in an impossible place. She could hold him together, but not for long. The ridgeline chewed with muzzle flashes. The net dissolved into grunts and short words and the dry crack of danger. She swore quietly and flipped her radio to a channel no one at FOB Halbert had mentioned aloud for 3 years. A call sign lived there, interred and waiting. "Overlord, this is Shade 17, she said, voice flat steel. "Troops in contact, danger close. Grid 42 Sierra Tango, marking with IR strobes. Authenticate Echo Kilo." A pause, brittle and shocked, then a voice like old leather. "Shade 17, authenticate received. Splash in 30, get down." Ava covered Maddox as the world tilted and thundered. Artillery walked the ridgelines in clean, devouring steps. Rock leapt into the air and became shrapnel. The enemy's fire stuttered, faltered, broke. "Red elements, heads down," Cruz roared. "That's our rain." The barrage ended like a door slamming. The ravine exhaled dust. Ava tied off what she could. "He needs a bird now." "Dust off 3-3, 8 mics," someone said on air. "Hot LZ. 8 minutes might as well be forever." Ava chambered around with bloody fingers and looked up the slope. Figures loomed and slipped away. The fight wasn't over. It had just decided to get close. Close was knives and breath. Enemy fighters poured down the slope, hard silhouettes framed in dust. Bravo formed a ragged horseshoe around the casualties and began to speak in single bursts, working discipline against chaos. Nate snapped a tourniquet tight on a thigh, clipped a occlusive seal onto a sucking chest while firing between his knees. "Rios!" Cruz shouted over the pitiless din. "We're black on 40 mic. Hold the line." Ava leaned into Maddox one last time. Looped intestine tucked, temporary sutures kissing shut what shouldn't be open. She secured his dressing and bungeed a litter strap under his hips to keep his world intact. "Don't die," she told him. "Not planning to," he breathed. A round slapped the truck hood an inch from her hand, leaving a blister of lead. Ava pivoted, shouldered her rifle, and sent 3 precise answers uphill. One man tumbled, another folded at the waist. "Spooky 4-1 is on station," an airborne voice said, calm as a surgeon. Ava pulled a compact laser from her bag, an IR designator no line medic should carry, and painted the leading edge of the assault. "Spooky 4-1, Shade 17. Sparkle on hostile mass. Cleared hot." Cleared hot. Daylight came back to the ravine in lethal bands. The AC-130's guns stitched geometry across rock, turning the human wave into broken arithmetic. The rush crumpled, then scattered. "Dust off 30 seconds," the pilot called, rotor thump already in the bones of the earth. Cruz and 2 shooters popped from cover, laid a sheet of fire for the Blackhawk as it flared in a sandstorm of its own making. Ava and Nate dragged litters into the rotor wash, loaded the worst first. Maddox with his world held together, a kid with a hole where a lung should be, a man pale as paper beneath a crimson wrap. Maddox found Ava's wrist. His hand was cold and strong. "Rios," he said, eyes glass bright behind grit. "I was wrong." "You're sedated," she said. "Save apologies for when you can do push-ups again." He managed a laugh that was half choke. "Yes, ma'am." The bird lifted, wagged, vanished into a smear of sky. The ravine quieted by degrees. Bravo policed brass and counted heads and swore softly at those who would not be on the count ever again. Cruz stood with Ava and Nate beside the black lake where the MRAP had burned out. "Who the hell are you?" he asked, no accusation in it, only awe and a sliver of fear. "Staff Sergeant," she said. Nothing else. Nate looked at her like a man glancing down a well and seeing stars. "Shade 17, he said softly. "I was a corpsman at Bagram when the Wraith unit was rumor. We heard numbers, never names." "That unit died in a training accident," Ava said. The old lie tasted like smoke. "Sure," Nate said. "And I'm the Queen of England." Cruz's radio hissed, Ward's voice. "All Reds, exfil to Halberd. Debrief in 30. They drove out of the Scorpion's spine at a crawl, Shock strapped into the passenger seats with the men. Ava watched the ridges unfold in the mirror. She could feel something old and ravenous waking up, something she'd promised to let sleep, discipline that becomes instinct, that becomes a language for navigating hell. Back inside the wire, the hospital smelled like iodine and palms pressed to foreheads. Surgeons pulled Maddox under white light. A major with eyes like scalpels listened to Ava rattle interventions, then peeled back her improvised dressing and stared. "That," he said, breath fogging his mask, "is art." "I'm not an artist," Ava said. "No," he agreed. "You're a weapon someone forgot to label." Colonel Ward pulled her into a side office with a manila folder stamped with enough red to paint a barn. "I have radio logs," Ward said. "I have call signs that don't exist. I have an AC-130 crew who want to know who taught a line medic to run them like a concerto." She slid the file across. "Shade 17 is officially deceased." Ava said nothing. "Not anymore," Ward murmured. "Not after today." Somewhere in the hospital's hum, a man who had torn her smock was trying not to die. Somewhere else, a unit that never was had just breathed in. Fob Halberd changed color when the sun went down. Green chem lights and red headlamps, generators muttering to themselves, gossip traveling faster than supply trucks. People stopped talking when Ava walked past. Heads pivoted, respect and fear mixed in the air like cordite and rain. She scrubbed blood from her nails until the skin turned raw and trudged to Building 3. From the outside, it was a Soviet relic doing a bad impression of a storage bunker. Inside, concrete stairs fell into a basement that smelled like dust and paper. Her flashlight swept file cabinets and one cork wall, needle-scarred with photographs. "Close the door," someone said behind her. Hannah Lee stepped from shadow into the cone of light. She moved differently now, 2 inches taller, spine straight as a rifle barrel. She gestured to the board. "I started collecting after my brother's funeral," she said. "He was killed in a training accident in a place that doesn't exist. He wore a number, not a name. Wraith unit." Ava's throat tightened. She recognized the stance of men in the photos the way you recognize your own handwriting. The tilt of a muzzle, the set of a shoulder, the ghost of a unit in grainy edges. "I knew he wasn't alone," Hannah said. "I watched the after-action reports. Every time something impossible happened, impossibly tight artillery, impossible shots, impossible field medicine, I pinned it. I figured someday one of you would surface." Ava stepped closer to a photo of a culvert in Helmand, stamped by a boot she could have drawn from memory. Shade 3's habit of towing in. "You're late," she said, "because the relief hurt. It's been 3 years." "I needed proof," Hannah said, and then shot Ava a wry look. Today was proof. Boots on the stairs. Ava's rifle came up, light painting dust. Nate Kim rolled into view with Cruz behind, both hands up, elbows out. "Easy," Cruz said. "We're friendlies. And we figured if you were going to break into a basement, it would be this one." Nate took the wall in with a medic's quick intake of breath. "So it's true," he whispered. "Wraiths didn't die. They scattered." Ava opened her mouth to answer and froze as another set of boots clattered down. A man in a simple field jacket, sleeves rolled, no rank showing but rank blaring from posture, stepped onto the last rung. He had the calm of someone who had ordered bad things and slept after. "General Richard Halverson," Cruz said, surprise making the surname a growl. "Deputy Director SOCOM, the man whose signature could make missions appear and disappear." "Staff Sergeant Rios," Halverson said, regarding her like a mathematician regards an elegant proof. "Or do you prefer Shade 17? "If you're here to arrest me for having the wrong radio," Ava said. "You're late." Halverson smiled, a thin blade. "I'm here to tell you 2 things. First, your little show in the ravine flushed something ugly. The ambush was orchestrated to confirm your identity. Someone inside the house is selling keys to our doors." "And second?" Ava asked. "Second," Halverson said. "Wraith wasn't killed. We cut it into pieces and buried them in different gardens because the rot was too deep to treat. We needed bait. We needed one of you to surface and draw eyes." He looked at the pins on the board, Syria, Kunar, Nineveh, like a teacher pleased with a student's messy brilliance. "Congratulations. You got their attention." Cruz shifted his weight. "You used her." Halverson didn't blink. "We used an asset. She was always going to be hunted. At least this way she hunts back." He turned to Ava. "We're reactivating you, unofficially. Or you can go back to being a line medic and wait for a mortar to land in your bed. Your call." Ava glanced at Hannah, at Cruz, at Nate. She thought of Maddox bleeding into the dirt and apologizing with a voice like sandpaper. She thought of Shade 3's foot in a picture and a promise written in a dead language. Bring them all home. "Where do I sign?" she asked. Halverson's smile widened by a molecule. "Wraiths don't sign. Wheels up in 6 hours. Get your house in order." He turned for the stairs, then paused. "One more thing. Captain Maddox survived because you broke every doctrine we teach. He's asking for you." When they were alone again, Cruz exhaled. "We're in," he said. "I don't care if it's official. You saved my men. That makes your fight my fight." Nate nodded. Hannah tapped a dog tag beneath her blouse. "My brother deserves the truth." Ava looked up at the wall of ghosts. "Then we do it my way," she said. "Tight, quiet, no heroes, no martyrs." She killed her flashlight. In the sudden dark, the ghosts felt closer, like breath on glass. The surgical ward hummed like a beehive. Ava moved through it with the gravity of someone who knew what machines could and couldn't do. Captain Cole Maddox lay propped under a white sheet that couldn't hide the ridge and tapework beneath his dressing. He looked smaller without the armor of his voice. "Staff Sergeant," he rasped when he saw her. "I owe you—" "No," she said. "You owe me compliance with your post-op orders." A cracked grin. "Fair." He took a breath that hurt to watch. "I was wrong about you. About everything. I don't know what you are, but you're the reason I get to figure it out." Ava pulled a chair closer, sat so the machines hid her from the door. "I'm a medic," she said. "On paper." "And off paper?" he asked. She didn't answer. He watched her a long time, expectation replaced by understanding. "Doesn't matter," he said softer. "You kept your promise. You brought us home." Ava swallowed. She wanted to tell him that wasn't always true, that there were names in her head that never answered muster. Instead, she said, "It's what the job is." "You going somewhere?" Maddox asked, maybe hearing the goodbye. "They say Ward pulled your comms logs. They say the deputy was on base. Sounds like movement." "I'm going to look for the people who tried to kill us in the ravine," she said. "And the people who helped them aim." He flinched at the bluntness, then nodded. "Take Cruz. Take Kim. They'll follow you into a volcano." His eyes glinted. "Take me when I can walk without my intestines staging a mutiny." Ava stood. On impulse, she took his hand. "Learn something from today," she said. "Strength isn't loud." "Neither is yours," he said. "It's relentless." She let his hand go. At the door, he called after her. "Ava!" She paused. It was the first time he'd said her name without scorn. "I'm sorry," he said, "truly." She tipped 2 fingers in a small salute. "Heal fast, Captain." Outside, the corridor smelled like bleach and fear. Nate waited by a vending machine, hands in pockets, pretending to be casual. Cruz leaned on the wall, a mountain in a human shirt. Hannah paced, restless energy wrapped in quiet. 6 hours, Ava said. Gear light, sieve clothes under plate carriers, clean radios. We use bone conduct and hand signals unless we absolutely must burn air. Where? Nate asked. Ava's mouth tucked. The ravine wasn't random. It was a test. The insider had to know our route. Our route came from the S3 shop in Ops. We started the transmission logs. Then we visit a relay hut east of the airstrip that's been down for maintenance 3 times in 2 weeks. Cruz grunted, impressed. You always this fun at parties? Only when they involve treason. Hannah smiled for the first time that night. I have base access, I shouldn't, she said. You'll want it. Good, Ava said. Bring a second pair of eyes and a camera that doesn't exist. She looked at the clock. The second hand hopped forward like a runner who couldn't wait to sprint. We're ghosts now, she said. Act like it. They split. Nate to his cage to pack, Cruz to whip 3 shooters into a shadow, Hannah to a server room with an innocent screensaver, Ava to her room to strip her life into a ruck that could go anywhere. She left the stitched smock on the cot, a shed skin. She took the needle and thread. When she stepped into the night again, it felt thinner, like a drumhead stretched too tight. Somewhere, Roders muttered, somewhere else, a man with a keyboard and a conscience problem waited to make a call he shouldn't. Ava laced her boots and smiled without mirth. Relentless, Maddox had said. Yes, she thought, that. They started with the quiet theft of time. Hannah's badge opened the S3 cell like a whispered rumor. While the captain argued with a printer tray upstairs, Ava ghosted through the workstation bay, sliding a thumb drive into a tower that hummed like a cold hive. She moved with her back flat to the room, counting breaths, letting the smell of old coffee and PVC settle into her skin. On the screen, Hannah's script ran like water over stone, pulling transmission logs, routing tables, metadata crumbs. Nate glanced the hall. Cruz leaned in a stairwell pretending to text a wife he didn't have. The file names stacked. Hannah killed the window, pocketed the drive, and they slipped out. 2 days before Patrol Order published, a packet went to a relay 2 clicks east, Hannah said as they crawled along the perimeter road in a beat-up Hilux with a canvas bed. Firewall marked it as maintenance pings, except it wasn't. East relay's been a problem child, Cruz muttered. Always down, always coming back up with a new sticker. They parked in shadow and went over the wire like they were born to do it. The relay squad among thorn trees didn't look like treason. It looked like a box that tolerated weather. Ava cracked it with a padlock shim and found an interior panel that was too new for the dust, a secondary board grafted like a tumor into the belly of a working machine. Hannah's headlamp washed pale light. Data mule, Hannah whispered. Tiny buffer, scheduled exfil with the dummy maintenance pings. Cute. Ava took pictures on a camera that would eat itself if captured and slid the board into a static bag. Who has physical access? She asked. 3 contractors, Hannah said, and Ops Sergeant Willis. Willis is clean, Cruz said at once, a reflex that sounded too quick for Ava's taste. Everyone is clean until they aren't, Ava said. We confirm or we cut them loose. Back at Building 3, they arrayed the parts on an old map table and built the picture. Hannah drew lines in pencil. Nate matched casualty reports. Cruz mapped the ambush positions against artillery splash. A mosaic took shape. Pings to the relay, pings out to a SAT truck that belonged to a contractor who'd rotated from 2 other bases that had both suffered incidents. The contractor's file had edges like a chewed coin. Name's Barstow, Cruz said, reading. Soft-spoken, keeps to himself. The ones who keep to themselves set me on edge. Location? Ava asked. Motor pool, night shift. Hannah's eyes flicked up. You going down there? Yes. Cruz put a hand on the table. We go down there, he corrected, and we go quiet. They went quiet. The motor pool was a grid of hunched shadows and oil. Barstow sat on the lip of a toolbox smoking a cigarette to its paper lungs, eyes on nothing. Ava walked up with the emptiness of someone who belongs everywhere. Barstow blinked, cigarette ash growing. Can I help you? Yes, Ava said. She held up the static bag. Tell me who paid you to install this. The cigarette trembled. He flicked it away, tried a smile that was really a grimace. Don't know what that is. Cruz drifted out of darkness behind him, all silhouette. Barstow's Adam's apple bobbed. Nate stood where he could stop bleeding if this turned into bleeding. Ava kept her voice soft. I'm a medic, she said. I put people back together. Tonight I'm trying very hard to save your life. You have 3 mistakes left. Left? He croaked. You lied once, she said. He stared, then shoulders fell, air leaving in a long hiss. They said no one would check the relay. They said the maintenance would cover it. Who? Cruz rock steady. Barstow wet his lips. I don't know. Handler changed. They used dead drops on a civilian server. Money hit a card in small bites. But he looked at Ava, guilt ripping him down the middle. There was a test. They said they needed to verify if a legacy asset was at Halberd. They said a medic. Nate swore under his breath. Show me the dead drop, Ava said. Barstow nodded faintly, fingers shaking. He led them to a battered desk, woke a dusty laptop, and navigated to a mirror site of a harmless gardening forum. Under Soil pH Tips, a backdoor login unfolded a list of file names and times. Recent one read, W17, confirm? Ava's neck chilled. Wraith 17. Shade 17. The handle was wrong, or it was right in a way that said someone on the other end had stood behind her once. A chat bubble blinked. A new line appeared. Welcome back to the living, 17. Hana's breath hitched. Cruz's hand went to his pistol. Nate's eyes flicked to Ava. Her heart thudded once and then became still as winter. She typed, "Who is this?" "We'll talk soon," the line returned. "He's watching you from the tower." Ava's skin prickled. She looked at Cruz, who was already moving. Nate killed the laptop. Hana pocketed the static bag. Barstow sat with his face in his hands, a man who finally understood the shape of his own shadow. "Tower?" Cruz asked. "TUC roof," Ava said. "We're about to meet a ghost or a traitor." They ran. The Tactical Operations Center rose like a square fist in the middle of Halberd, floodlights casting a bright moat. They moved in staggered shadows, Ava and Cruz up the exterior ladder, Nate and Hana circling to block exits. On the roof, the night wind tasted like dust and diesel. A man stood at the far edge, hands on the parapet, posture loose, unafraid. He didn't turn as they came. "Careful," he said, voice even. "If you shoot me, the paperwork will be unbearable." "Turn around," Cruz said. He did, slow. He was mid-40s, sun-carved, a white crescent scar under his left eye. His hair had that regulation-defying length that either meant he was untouchable or suicidal. He wore no insignia. He moved like a wraith. "Avery Locke," he said, offering nothing like a smile. "Shade 3. The name hit Ava in the sternum. "You died outside Lashkar Gah." "So did you," he said. "Funny how that works." Cruz kept the muzzle where it belonged. "If he's a friend," he said to Ava without moving his eyes, "why is our patrol route in a dead drop he watches?" Locke lifted his hands in a gesture that was almost a shrug. "Because the people I'm hunting used the same dead drop. Because the only way to find a rat is to leave cheese. Because Halverson decided to make bait out of you but didn't plan the trap." "You're with Halverson?" Ava asked. "I'm with the wraiths who survived," Locke said. "A few of us never learned how to be dead." He tilted his head. "Your dance in the ravine was loud enough to wake old neighbors. The seller you're looking for isn't Willis, and it isn't Barstow. They're tools. The hand lives upstairs in planning and downstairs in contracts." "Names," Cruz said. Locke's eyes flicked to the perimeter. "Names get people killed, but I'll give you a starting gun. Tonight at 0300, a SAT truck 2 clicks south will handshake with your pet relay. The handler will be in a Hilux with a bent front plate. You cut that line, you get a breadcrumb. You follow the breadcrumb, you get a snake. You hold the snake, maybe you make it talk." "And you?" Ava asked. "I light fires in other rooms," Locke said. "And I make sure you don't die before you're useful." Ava stepped closer until the wind was louder than either of them. "Are you with me?" she asked. "Or just with your mission?" Locke's mouth twitched. "Those used to be the same thing." "Not anymore," she said. "With me or in my way." He met her eyes, unblinking, and in that look she saw the barracks laugh of a man who had once thrown her an MRE and told her the joke no one else got. She also saw the blood of a place she never wanted to remember. He nodded once, the tiniest movement. "With you, then." Below, Nate's whisper licked her earwig. 2 vehicles just left the south gate. Ava didn't glance away from Locke. "We'll take your breadcrumb," she said. "But if you're playing both sides—" "I die tired," Locke said. Tick-tock 17. He was gone by the time Cruz blinked. Ghosts do that. Move between frames of film. Exit stage left while the lights are still bright. Ava and Cruz slid down the ladder. Nate rolled up with Hana in the Hilux within a minute. 2 trucks exactly as advertised, Hana said, showing a grainy frame on her tablet. 1 SAT box, 1 Hilux with a front plate that dipped like a bad tooth. "Line them up," Ava said. "We're not shooting unless we must." She pulled her carbine, checked the magazine, felt the familiar click of selector. "We take the handler breathing." "Copy," Cruz said. "Copy," Nate echoed. Hana swallowed. "Copy." They rolled south without headlights, the desert turning to bone under the moon. The SAT truck's dish winked in the distance like a lazy eye. The Hilux idled 20 meters off, a man standing with his back to them, phone to ear, posture saying this was just another Monday in hell. Ava took 2 steps into the open and said the hardest word in any language. "Don't!" The man twisted, startled, hand dipping toward a waistband. Cruz struck like weather, dropping him with a shoulder and a bracket of forearms before he could find the pistol. Nate kneeled on the man's arm and talked to him in the simple, terrible grammar of leverage. The SAT tech froze. Hannah waved him back from the dish with 2 fingers and the kind of look that stops children and fools. Ava crouched by the handler's ear. "We can do this with air and teeth," she said quietly, "or with words. Words are cheaper." "Go to hell," he spat. "Already been?" she said. "You won't like it?" She nodded to Cruz, who leaned a fraction more. Structures in the man's shoulder made unhappy, fibrous noises. "Okay," he gasped. "Okay." "Name," Ava said. He gave it. It tasted like a non-entity. But the second name he offered, shaking, trying to buy oxygen, did not. It was a contractor who ate 3 bases and walked away clean. It was a senior planner in contracts who signed off on maintenance. It was, abruptly, a ladder that led up and away and into darkness. They had a snake by the tail. It began to coil. Dawn was a thin line when they brought the handler and the SAT tech through Halberd's back gate, gagged and bagged. Colonel Ward met them in a nondescript room with coffee that smelled like burnt hope. Halverson arrived without fanfare, tie loosened, eyes red with calculation. He listened to the names and did not blink. "Good," he said at last. "We go now." "Now?" Ward asked, more tired than surprised. "Before the snake sheds its skin," Halverson said. A flight crew warmed a black helicopter that didn't belong to any book. Cruz kitted up 2 shooters with spare mags and quiet eyes. Nate packed a bag that could resuscitate a stone. Hannah clicked a fresh drive into a device built by someone who should have been arrested for imagination. Ava checked her weapon, her kit, and the knot in her chest. Shade 3's message still crawled like an insect at the back of her mind. On the way to the Bird, she stopped in the hospital ward. Maddox slept, a line of drool shining at the corner of his mouth, dignity long gone to the morphine gods. Ava stood a moment, watching his chest rise and fall. His hand twitched, searching for a cord he couldn't find. She took it, squeezed once, left before the monitors could notice. On the flight line, Locke appeared out of wind and rotor wash like he'd been born there. He climbed aboard without a word, nodded to Cruz, to Nate, to Hannah, and took the seat opposite Ava. For a span of seconds long enough to be a life, they said nothing and understood everything. The Bird lifted, banked, carved the sky toward a coordinate string that Halverson refused to speak aloud. Over the spine of the world, the sun broke, gold cutting the backs of the mountains. The headset crackled. 10 minutes. "Rules," Ava said over intercom. "No collateral, no shots that don't count. We grab the planner alive if the universe is kind. We grab hard drives if it's not." "Copy," Cruz said. "Copy," Nate said. Hannah nodded, jaw set. Locke's voice was a low instrument. "If the universe is unkind, then we burn the truck," Ava said, "and we make new snakes out of ashes." They touched down in a bowl of rock, rotors flinging grit. The SAT truck waited like a spider. A Land Cruiser hugged its bumper. 2 men smoked beside it. There were other men in the hollow's edges, holes in the air where humans didn't belong. "Friends," Locke said, and meant enemies. They fanned. Hannah slid to a console box and began stealing time. Cruz and the shooters stitched sightlines into geometry. Nate found a place to set a blood bag he'd likely need. Ava walked into the dip in the earth like she owned it. "Hands," she said to the planner, "now!" Guns came up in a dozen places, then the world got very small. It was a choreography written by exhaustion and practice. Cruz hit the first rifle with a pellet of light and followed with a punch of metal. Ava took the left flank with 2 controlled burps. Nate dragged the SAT tech into cover by the belt and traded gauze for gunfire. Hannah ripped the heart out of a hard drive and made copies before it knew it had ever lived. The planner tried to run. Locke moved like a statement and put him into the dirt. "Don't," he advised, not unkindly. It was over before the echo died. It always is until it isn't. They loaded the planner, bled the SAT tech back toward Pink, bagged the drives. The helicopter lifted them toward a horizon where consequences lived. On the intercom, Halverson's voice came through another Bird. "Good work. Bring them home." Ava looked out over the mountains. Down on Halberd's roofs, a figure watched the sky with hands in his pockets, someone with the posture of a man who believed endings could be written. The radio in her ear clicked alive with a voice that could have stepped out of a memory and put on a new name. "Shade 17, it said. "Welcome back to the living." Locke heard it too. His eyes slid to hers. 3? She asked. Could be, he said. Could be the one who sold us out wearing a friend's skin. Ava's hand found the small bag with her thread and needle. She thought about the smock she had stitched and shed, about the scar under her sleeve that wasn't shrapnel, about Maddox calling strength relentless, about Ward's eyes when she'd said Shade 17 was dead. Death was a paperwork problem. Loyalty wasn't. She keyed the mic. You don't get to welcome me, she said, voice even enough to shave with. You get to answer questions. Silence. Then a line of text on Hana's tablet pushed through a channel that shouldn't exist. Trust no one. W17. Hana looked up, eyes wide. It's signed W17. Ava exhaled, the breath leaving her in a way that felt like permission and warning. Another Wraith, she said. Or someone who knows how to pretend. The helicopter beat east. The day thickened. On the floor between Ava's boots sat a hard drive with a dozen names and the beginnings of a map. Beside her, Locke rested with his eyes half shut. Cruz cleaned his rifle with a rag that would never be white again. Nate traced the edges of a life he had just saved, and Hana watched code march like ants. Ava closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, the edges of the world were sharper. She wasn't a medic in a torn smock anymore. She wasn't only a ghost with a number. She was both, and more. Someone who understood that promises are knives, tools if you know how to hold them, wounds if you don't. Wheels up, the pilot said, voice warm with victory he didn't fully own. Copy, Ava said. Let's go hunting.